My name is Athena Wheeler, and I was 30 years old the night my mother-in-law slapped me hard enough to send my newborn daughter tumbling from my arms. It was 12:40 in the morning. My daughter Nora was crying through a fever, and the last thing Lorraine said before her hand struck was, "Shut her up or get out of my house." But the slap wasn't the worst thing that happened that night. The worst thing was what the doctor discovered on my daughter's scans. Injuries that were already weeks old from nights I believed she was safe. And what my mother-in-law did next while my baby rested in a hospital crib is the reason I'm telling you this story. She didn't apologize. She didn't admit anything. She grabbed the phone and went to work on me. Where women share the moments that changed everything. The betrayals, the breaking points, and the quiet strength it takes to walk through them. If stories like this one speak to you, leave a comment below and be sure to subscribe because you won't want to miss where this goes. Let me go back to January, because nobody ends up on a mother-in-law's floor plan by accident. My husband Caleb lost his fabrication job 2 weeks after we discovered I was pregnant. He landed a pipeline welding contract quickly. Good money, terrible math. 3 weeks away, 1 week home every month. I taught second grade on a yearly contract, which meant my maternity leave paid absolutely nothing. We sat at our kitchen table with a calculator and 2 cups of cold coffee and admitted what the numbers already told us. We couldn't keep our apartment and save for a deposit at the same time. Lorraine's house in Dayton had 4 bedrooms and 1 occupant. Caleb's mother had been widowed 8 years, and she offered before we even asked. Family helps family, she said. The plan was simple. 6 months under her roof, $4,000 in the moving fund by fall, then a rental with a small yard close to my school. I want to be honest about one more thing, because it matters later. My own mother died when I was 12. My dad drove long-haul freight and raised me on truck stop pancakes and common sense, and he's gone now too. So, when Caleb carried our boxes up Lorraine's porch steps, part of me was carrying something heavier. A hope I'd never spoken out loud. I wanted a mother again. I wanted Sunday dinners and somebody to call when the baby wouldn't latch. I wanted Lorraine to be something she never offered to be. She met us at the door in a pressed blouse, smelling of lemon polish, and she hugged me. I remember thinking her house was the cleanest place I'd ever stood in, the kind of clean that feels like a warning. It was the last hug that didn't cost me anything. Nora arrived the first week of March, 7B even, with Caleb's chin and a cry that could strip paint. Lorraine drove us home from the hospital and had dinner waiting, and for about 4 days I believed I was lucky. Then the help started helping. I'd pump and label bottles, and I'd find them rearranged. Some poured out because she made too much again. Lorraine set one out for a feeding, and then waited after writing the number on a magnetic pad on the fridge. She posted a schedule up there too. Feedings, naps, tummy time in her handwriting, not mine. When I picked Nora up between the scheduled times, Lorraine would lift her straight back out of my arms. "You'll spoil her," she said. "Babies need order, not hovering." I tried the polite version of a boundary. I said I appreciated everything, and I wanted to follow the pediatrician's advice. Feed on demand. Lorraine laughed the way you laugh at a child who said something sweet and wrong. "Honey, I raised a son on a schedule and he survived just fine." The strangest part was the language. Alone with me, Nora was our baby, our routine, our house, our rules. But when her church friends came by with casseroles, I'd hear her in the front room, low and warm. "My grandbaby. I'm practically raising her, you know. Her mother's still learning." I stood in the hallway holding my own daughter and felt like a nanny in a house where I paid no rent and had no say. I told myself it was a generational thing. I told myself 6 months. I was already doing the thing that almost cost Nora everything, translating every red flag into a language I could live with. Lorraine's house ran on rules the way a church runs on hymns. Nobody voted on them, and everybody stood when told, shoes off at the door, lined up by size, laundry on Tuesdays and Fridays, whites separate, and she rewashed anything I folded wrong. Phone calls happened in the kitchen on speaker because people who whispered in their rooms had something to hide. She ironed her napkins. I should have known. The first Sunday of April, her sister Carol came over for dinner. All perfume and opinions, and the two of them swapped neighborhood news over pot roast. I mentioned the family across the street. The wife had moved out that winter, and I said softly that I hoped she was okay, that people don't walk away from good marriages for no reason. The table went quiet. Lorraine placed her fork and knife down on either side of her plate, precise as a surgeon, and stared at me the way you look at a stain. A good mother knows when to stay silent. That was the entire sermon. Carol nodded into her sweet tea like scripture had been spoken. I remember the warmth creeping up my neck, and I remember saying nothing, which felt at the time like keeping the peace, and feels now like training. That night, I lay in bed listening to the television murmuring downstairs, Nora's bassinet an arm's length away, and I did the math I did every night. The moving fund was growing. Caleb would be home in 11 days, 9 more weeks, maybe 10, and we'd be gone, and Lorraine could return to ironing napkins for an empty table. 9 weeks. I've learned since then the most expensive thing in my life was the arithmetic I used to talk myself down. Caleb flew back to the pipeline on a Tuesday, and the house changed temperature before his truck left the street. That first night alone, Lorraine appeared in my doorway at 10 o'clock, arms out. Give her here. You need sleep, and I raised a baby before you were born. I said, thank you, and no, we were fine. She took Nora anyway, scooped her up mid-sentence, and walked away. And I stood there rehearsing objections to an empty room. I'm not proud of that. I was 3 weeks postpartum, stitched and exhausted in a house with her name on the deed. I woke at 2 in the morning to silence, and silence was wrong. The bassinet was empty. I don't have words for the particular cold that runs through you when you reach into the darkness where your baby should be and touch sheet. I went down the hall, her bedroom at the far end of the second floor, past the nursery, and I knocked, then opened the door without waiting. Lorraine sat in her armchair with Nora swaddled tightly on the bed beside her, and she looked at me like I'd dragged mud inside. You'd think a mother would be grateful for a full night's sleep, she said. Ungrateful is an ugly color on you, Athena. I took my daughter back, and my hands were trembling, which Lorraine pointed out aloud. For the record, in the morning, I called Caleb from the backyard. I kept my voice steady and told him exactly what happened. There was a pause, machinery grinding somewhere behind him, and then the sentence I'd hear 100 times before June. That's just Mom. She raised me fine. Here's the detail I couldn't stop chewing on, though. That morning, Nora slept until almost noon, deep and still. And when I said it seemed unusual, Lorraine smiled. She finally learned to settle. In late April, I found the bruise. I was changing Nora before her bath, and there on her left arm were 3 small marks, oval and neat, like someone had pressed fingertips into bread dough. My stomach dropped through the floor of that beautiful house. I asked Lorraine directly. No accusation, just the question. She didn't blink. She wiggled during a diaper change. You have to hold them firmly, or they roll right off the table. You'd know that if you listened. I made a pediatrician appointment for the next morning, and I took pictures on my phone with the date visible because some animal part of me had stopped believing this would remain small. Dr. Hartman looked Nora over, measured and gentle. Bruises on a baby this young are worth watching, he said. Could be handling, could be nothing. Keep an eye. I heard the unspoken half. Keep an eye on whom? That weekend, while Caleb was on a video call from a motel in Oklahoma, I pulled the baby camera out of the shower gift closet, and he walked me through mounting it on the nursery shelf, aimed at the crib and the entire room. He thought it was for sending him clips of Nora. It half was. The app offered a cloud plan, 30 days of storage for $2.99 a month, and I signed up under my own email, the one I don't use for family things. I couldn't have told you why that felt necessary. Instinct doesn't file reports. Lorraine watched me test the little white camera from the doorway, arms crossed. Cameras, she said, are for people who don't trust family. Then she walked away. And that was the last time she ever mentioned it. She never asked me to take it down. I should have questioned much harder why she stopped talking about it. May came in expensive. My car started slipping gears in a school parking lot, and the shop called it a transmission rebuild. $1,900. Take it or start walking. We took it because a mother without a car in a suburb is a prisoner with extra steps. The hospital's billing office had already been sending their monthly love letters for the birth, the deductible we were still chipping away at. I sat at the kitchen table with the calculator after Nora's late feeding and watched the moving fund shrink on paper. Almost $3,400 at the start of the month. $1,500 by the end. Fall felt like it had moved to another continent. I didn't hear Lorraine come in behind me. She was quiet when she wanted to be, loud when it worked better. She looked over my shoulder at the yellow legal pad, at my little columns of hope, and she said it almost gently, which was the worst part. Where would you even go? You have nothing. Then she filled the kettle like she'd commented on the weather. I want to be clear, because I know how these stories sound from the outside. I wasn't helpless. I applied for 2 summer tutoring gigs that week. I moved the fund to an account Lorraine couldn't see at the credit union. I wrote a new number on the inside cover of my planner. 8 more weeks, and I pressed hard enough to groove the paper. I did everything a careful woman does when she smells smoke but can't yet see fire. What I didn't have was money, backup, or a witness, and Lorraine knew the exact value of each thing I lacked. 8 more weeks, I wrote. Nora didn't have 8 weeks. I found the photograph on laundry day, which in Lorraine's house is a supervised activity. Except that afternoon she'd gone to her church circle. On the high shelf above the dryer sat a shoebox of pictures, the lid loose, and I only meant to straighten it before it fell. On top was a square photo gone orange with age, a skinny girl in a wedding lace collar, 22 or 23, standing on a porch in the snow, next to an older woman with a face like a locked door. The girl was Lorraine. I'd never seen her look uncertain in my life, and there she was, shoulders curled in, hands folded, standing half a step behind the older woman like a hired girl. On the back in faded ink, First Winter in Dorothy's House, 1987. I knew the name from exactly one conversation. Dorothy was Caleb's grandmother, his late father's mother, Lorraine's mother-in-law. When I'd once asked about her, Caleb had shrugged on the phone. She was a hard woman. Mom never talks about those years. I stood in the laundry room with the dryer thumping and stared at that girl for a long time. And something shifted in my chest that I didn't have a name for yet. Then I heard the front door. Lorraine came around the corner, unwinding her scarf, saw the box, saw the photo in my hand, and her face did something I had never seen it do. It went white. Not angry white. Frightened white. She crossed the room in 3 steps and took the photograph from my fingers, gently, the way you take a knife from a toddler, and she said, "Some things aren't yours to look at." For 1 full second, my mother-in-law had looked exactly like prey. Nora's colic arrived in May like weather. Every evening from 6 to 10, a crying jag no bottle or bath could touch. The pediatrician said it was common and would pass. Lorraine said it was discipline, and hers was the opinion with a house attached. You pick her up every time she fusses, so she fusses. Let her cry it out. Babies train mothers in this family, apparently, instead of the other way around. I kept doing what my gut and my doctor agreed on. Then came the Thursday. I ran to the store for diaper cream. 20 minutes. Lorraine waving me off the way you shoo a fly. I came back in through the kitchen and heard Nora screaming upstairs. A raw hoarse scream, the kind that had been going a while. Lorraine sat in the front room with the television on, hands folded, perfectly calm. I took the stairs 2 at a time and turned the nursery knob, and it didn't turn. Locked from the hallway side with the little brass key that lived in the door. I got it open and scooped Nora up, her whole face slick and purple, her sleeper soaked through with sweat, and I stood there shaking while she hiccuped herself quiet against my neck. Downstairs, Lorraine didn't even look away from her program. 10 minutes won't kill her. You're making her weak. I said as evenly as I could manage that no door in this house would ever be locked on my daughter again. Lorraine smiled at the television, like it had told a joke. 2 days later, I went to check the nursery door just to reassure myself. The little brass key was gone from the lock. I never found out where it went. Caleb came home the first week of June for 5 days, and Lorraine put on a production the Dayton Community Theater would have envied. Fresh peach cobbler, hymns hummed over the stove. Nora rocked and cooed at and shone off like a prize rose. "Your wife is so lucky I'm here," she told him, spooning rice cereal. She'd decided Nora was ready for it against the pediatrician's advice. Some girls have no help at all. I waited until Caleb and I were alone in our room, and I laid everything out, calm and in order, like a lesson plan. The bottle weighing, the empty bassinet, the bruise with the dated photos, the locked door, the missing key. He listened, and I watched the war across his face. The man who loved me against the boy who had spent 33 years being taught his mother's love was law. "Babe," he said finally, rubbing his eyes. "Maybe you heard it wrong. The door sticks. You're exhausted. She's a lot. But she'd never hurt Nora." Downstairs, his mother was singing to my daughter. He wasn't choosing her over me. Not exactly. He was choosing not to look, which costs less upfront and everything later. Sunday night, he kissed us both and drove off to Louisville to catch his crew flight, and I stood on the porch with Nora on my shoulder and watched his taillights disappear. The front door had barely clicked shut behind me when Lorraine's voice came from the kitchen, no warmth left in it. Each word set down like a place setting. "He was my son long before he was your husband." I turned around, and she was drying a dish, smiling. "Just so we understand each other," she said. The camera had a motion alert I mostly ignored, because a nursery generates motion the way a pond generates ripples. But that Wednesday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I was folding onesies in the basement when my phone buzzed, and for no reason I could defend, I opened the app and watched. Lorraine crossed the nursery to the crib, where Nora had startled awake, crying. And then my mother-in-law grabbed my daughter one-handed under one armpit and jerked her up out of the crib. A short, hard yank, the way you'd snatch a purse off a chair, and gave her one sharp jostle. On the little screen, Nora's head wobbled. My whole body went cold and precise at the same time. I saved the clip. I walked upstairs. I did the thing the books tell you to do. No ambush, no raised voice. I held out the phone and said, "This scared me. Look how her head moves. She's too little for that." Lorraine watched the clip the way you'd watch a commercial. Then she looked up at me, and I promise you, her voice was velvet, a jumpy little video from a camera on a shelf. "Honey, you've been off since the birth. Postpartum does things to women. Everyone at church has seen how you hover, how you shake. I'd hate for anyone official to start asking whether you're coping." She handed my phone back and smoothed her skirt. It took me until I was back down the stairs to understand what had just happened. I had shown her my evidence, and she had shown me hers. That if this ever left the house, she'd already built the version where I was the dangerous one. She'd been building it for weeks. I have one friend who has never once told me to calm down, and that June she earned a medal for it. Bree Okafor and I taught Sunday school together, years back before she went to nursing school, and now she works labor and delivery at Miami Valley. We met at a coffee place halfway between her shift and my errands. Nora asleep in the carrier, and I talked for 20 minutes without stopping. Bree stirred her coffee once and said, "Athena, she's not old school. She's running your whole life and calling it love. There's a name for that, and it doesn't get better on its own." Then she did what nurses do. She made a plan with exits. Her spare room was mine the day I needed it. No phone call. She'd walk me through documenting everything with dates. I picked up an online summer job scoring standardized tests nights from my phone if I had to. 6 more weeks and the fund would clear 2,000 again. Enough for a deposit on something small, ugly, and entirely mine. Sitting in that coffee shop, I heard Lorraine's voice in my head. A good mother knows how to keep quiet. And for the first time, I talked back to it. Quiet hadn't bought me one single day of safety. If you have ever sat in a parking lot rehearsing how to explain your own home to someone so it wouldn't sound crazy out loud, tell me about it in the comments, because I know that rehearsal by heart. And subscribe, because where this story goes next, I never saw coming. I drove back to the house feeling lighter than I had in weeks. Then I walked into my bedroom and stopped. My dresser drawers were shut wrong, pushed flush when I always leave the top one proud. Someone had been through my things. The envelope appeared at my place at the dinner table 3 nights later. Cream-colored. My name in Lorraine's beautiful looping hand like a wedding invitation. Inside was an itemized bill, room and board, $300 a month times 5 months, plus a line for utilities she'd rounded up with Christian generosity. $1,750 payable at my convenience, meaning now. I looked up and she was watching me over her glasses. Pleasant as pie. Nothing in this world is free, sweetheart. Family least of all. I called Caleb that night from the backyard, my breath fogging even in June, it felt like, and I read him the bill line by line. He was 14 hours into a shift and his voice had gravel in it. She's proud, babe. It's her way. Just pay her and we'll figure it out. I'll pick up overtime. Just pay her. The moving fund held about $1,500, and the bill wanted all of it, plus my next tutoring check. I paid. I stood at the credit union counter and drained the account I'd hidden from her, and the teller asked if I was closing it, and I said, no, leave it open. Leave it open, please. $5 stayed in that account like a pilot light. Here's what I understood on the drive back, gripping the wheel of my $1,900 transmission. Lorraine didn't need our money. Her house was paid off. Her late husband's pension kept her in ironed napkins. The bill wasn't income, it was engineering. She wasn't trying to make money off us. She was cutting the rope bridge plank by plank, and she wanted me to watch each one fall. The Saturday after I paid the bill, I decided to send Bree the crib jerk clip so somebody besides me had a copy. I opened the camera app in the nursery while Nora napped, and the local folder was empty. Not short, empty. Weeks of clips were gone. I stood on the step stool and checked the little white camera on its shelf, and the SD card sat in its slot too neatly. Clicked in the way I never left it, and every video on it had been erased. She knew. She had known for who knows how long. Had waited for me to leave for the store or the credit union, climbed up on something at 62 years old, figured out or looked up how to pull a memory card, and erased the record. I sat down in the glider with my heart going like a dryer with shoes in it, and I almost pulled the camera down and packed it in a box because what was the point? Then I looked at the app again. Bottom of the screen, small gray letters I'd stopped noticing months ago. Cloud backup active 30 days, $2.99 a month. Built to an email address Lorraine had never heard of. She had erased the card. The card was a decoy neither of us had meant to set. Everything the camera saw went up and out of that house every single day to a place her keys and her bleach and her beautiful handwriting couldn't reach. I sat very still for a long time. Then I did the hardest strategic thing I have ever done as a mother, harder than anything that came after. I put the step stool away. I left the camera exactly where it was, red light steady, aimed at my daughter's crib, and I let my mother-in-law go on believing she had won that round. Let it record, I thought. Lord, let it record. I only ever saw Lorraine come apart once, and it wasn't at me. It was a rainy Tuesday night in mid-June, and she'd taken a phone call from someone at church, a granddaughter of one of the circle ladies, I gathered. Some young mother who'd up and left her husband's family, and taken the babies with her. Lorraine hung up and sat at the kitchen table with a juice glass of cherry, which I had never seen her drink, and she stared at the window like it owed her something. I was warming a bottle. I could have left. I didn't. And into that quiet, my mother-in-law started talking. Not really to me. The winter Caleb was born, she said. He had colic like Nora's, screaming from supper time to midnight. And one night, Dorothy, her mother-in-law, the locked door face from the photograph, took hold of her arm, put her out on the back porch in the snow with the baby, and turned the bolt. She stood in the window, Lorraine said, level as a weather report, watching me until I figured out how to make him stop. She turned the juice glass a quarter turn. Nobody came for me. I stayed quiet and I survived. That's how it's done. For one terrible minute I saw her wound. A 20-some girl on a frozen porch. Learning that love in that house was something you earned by disappearing and then spending 40 years passing the lesson down like China. I felt sorry for her. I need you to know I felt sorry for her because of what I have to tell you next. The following morning, she took the bottle I'd made, poured it out, remade it her way, and weighed it. The girl on the porch was gone. The woman Dorothy built remained. And I kept thinking, if surviving it once gives you the right to pass it on, where does it ever end? Then came 2 good weeks, and I let them fool me. Lorraine softened the way weather softens. No apology, just less of her. She complimented my casserole. She let a feeding go unweighed. Nora's colic was easing the way Dr. Hartman promised it would, and at her checkup, he wrapped the tape around her head, plotted the dot on the curve, and said the sweetest sentence in the English language. She's growing exactly like she should. Caleb called every night that stretch, and on the good connection from a motel in Tulsa, he said the words I'd been saving up for. Next rotation, he said. When I'm home in July, we look at rentals. We tell Mom together, we go. I wanted a witness for that promise, so I made him say it twice. I was folding tiny socks on the bed with the phone on speaker, which was against house rules. Calls happen in the kitchen, and I heard too late how quiet the hallway had gotten. No footsteps, no television. When I opened the door, the hall was empty, but the runner rug was scuffed up near the top of the stairs, and downstairs the kitchen light.